Hey there, this is going to be my take on a tier list. This video is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be less editing, just me talking about the units. Now, if you're interested in the tier list itself, I'm going to put the link in the description. You can just also just skip to the end of the video. Before we start, let's just quickly go over a couple of things. Now, obviously, this is just my opinion. It's based on my experiences, some theory crafting, me seeing what other people have success with. A lot of the challenges in the game can be overcome with levels and time. So if you just want to play casually, there's no need to follow any guides. I think I'm also going to talk briefly about the classes, which classes I think perform better, which worse. Let's briefly go over the brackets too. First we have the question mark tier. A spoiler ahead, there's going to be only one unit. We're going to discuss it when we get to her. S tier are the leapers that if you have copies of them, you should very strongly consider including them into your roster, or just building straight around them. A tier are leapers that still perform great, a lot of units that you can still build around. They're just not as outright broken as the S tiers. B tier is going to be just overall solid units that you can fill up your roster, maybe trying to complete some resonances or looking for specific synergies. C tier are units that I think are weaker, but I would still consider them when trying to finish some of the comps. D tier are just units that you would have to go out of your way to include in a formation. And E tier are, in my opinion, the worst units that I would have trouble fitting into any comp that I'm serious about. Okay, so without further ado, let's just jump into the tier list. Okay, starting with Amber, let's talk about assassins in general. I think assassins are fairly good. They can really snowball a fight if you manage to pick up a target or two. They have the unique ability to fight from backline to frontline. They're also pretty good in PvP, in my opinion. That said, they are lacking a little bit of versatility compared to some other classes, and I think progressing through the campaign, you might struggle a little bit at some stages. So what about Amber herself? I think Amber, now she has a little bit going for her. She has a hard-hitting ultimate with crowd control, some utility with reducing accuracy, and increased almost like a additional chance to crit on her basic attacks. That said, I don't think she does anything especially well, and with assassins you just want very front-loaded damage to just snowball a fight. So for now I'd put her in D tier. She's almost a C tier for me, but I'd have to test her more. Next with Becky, let's talk about mages. I think mages are very powerful. Most of them have really good AoE damage, some really good utility. There are just a lot of really solid characters in this class. I would definitely recommend them. So I believe Becky got a little bit nerfed compared to the soft launch. I think her clones receive more AoE damage and take longer to spawn. She would be an S tier otherwise for me, but for now let's put her at A tier. She can do a lot of damage if the fight goes long enough, but most importantly she provides a lot of tankiness, and if she's ahead, or maybe the fight is somewhat even, she can really prolong a fight, allowing you other characters to shine. Next we have Seedream Becky. I think supports, although they are a little bit overlooked, are very solid. I think funneling power into specific units in your formation is a very powerful strategy. Overall, they're just usually solid units that are easy to fit in. So where would I put her? I think she's a very versatile unit. She has healing, shielding, gives energy, gives an attack buff. It makes her really easy to fit in any formation. So we're gonna put her into B tier. She's a fairly new unit. She might need some testing, but time will tell if she should be higher. Next we have Clara. Clara has very high single target damage, some really good steroids that make her scale very well with stats. We're gonna put her at B tier. She lacks a little bit on mobility and survivability, but despite that, I think she's really solid. Next is D. She's a very good healer, especially when fully upgraded. She's also one of the few order units, and since she's a 2-star, she's very easily accessible, so that might come quite in handy. That's gonna land her in B tier. Next we have Dora Nana. You're gonna get a ton of her genes when you start the game. You're gonna easily get her to 5 stars or even phase 1, but the question is she a good unit? And I would say yes. I'm a little bit conflicted if she should be A or S tier. We're gonna put her at S tier. Not only does she do really solid damage, but her ultimate really helps with tanking, and pretty consistently is a deciding factor when closing out battles. Now with Doris, let's talk a little bit about tanks. I think tanks are in a very interesting spot. I mean, you are going to need a front line, no matter what. And with tanks, the lower rarity, the 1 and 2 stars, are the units that have built-in damage reductions. And the 3 stars are the units that focus on more on utility and damage. But they do have higher stats, which makes all of the tanks pretty competitive with each other, I think. So what about Doris herself? I personally value her a lot. She has some healing, some damage reduction when she's low on health. But the most interesting part of her kit is her passive. You can really crack open some difficult comps, and ironically enough, the fact that she, basically has a self-stun on herself at the beginning of battle makes her really good at catching enemy assassin aggro. So for me, she's an A tier. Maybe you could argue that most of the tanks should be B tier, but I'll leave her here for now. With Phia, let's quickly go over the Rangers. I think Rangers are just really versatile and good damage dealers, very similar to mages. They just focus more on basic attacks. So they're definitely, if you're looking for damage dealers, they're definitely characters to consider. Now, Phia has undergone some changes recently. She would have been S tier before the changes. She's still pretty good, just more situational. She really needs the right circumstances to pop off when it comes to damage. But she's still very strong and deals a ton of AoE damage. So A tier for me. Next is Fun, and Fun is really hard to judge. Before the global launch, her passive used to give 1.5 and 2.5% of her max health as defense. Now it's 15% and 25%, which is quite the ridiculous buff. She's extremely strong right now, but it is very unclear to me if this was intended or someone just moved the decimal point by accident. So right now I'm gonna put her into the question mark tier. Although if you want to use her right now, she is very strong. Then we have another tank, Golin. Golin is very good at damage mitigation. She provides some utility. She can really hold down the front line. Sadly, she really suffers from the lowered stats because she's a 1-star unit. We're gonna put her at C tier. Another problem with her right now is that she's really outclassed by Fan. Next we have Guru. She has a very interesting kit. She might be a little bit untested, but she has the ability to restore large amounts of energy to your team, and also has a 50% defense reduction on an AoE for 5 seconds. As with most supports, she fits a lot of comps and is just overall really solid, B tier. Then we have Hardo. What she lacks in damage, she makes up in utility. She applies a frost debuff, which reduces attack speed, and even situationally can deal quite a bunch of damage. If you're maybe looking for a character for your ranger resonance, I think she's a decent option, B tier. Next we have Idalia. Her kit is mostly focused on buffs and debuffs, with herself having a chance to dodge attacks. Now sadly this is not what assassin compositions are looking for, so with her being a 1-star and having fairly low base stats, I think she's one of the worst characters in the game right now, E tier. Then we have J001. Most of her kit revolves around her ultimate. She buffs your highest attack character and restores energy to her. Most damage carries have very impactful ultimates, so she's just another solid option to fill out your roster, B tier. Next we have the C-Dream version of J001. She definitely can do some damage, but not the highest amounts. Her gimmick is more focused on displacing enemies, which is definitely useful. Enemies that are moved around often switch targets, so if you're resetting a stage a lot of times, you might find the right spot where to put her, so it works in your favor. She's definitely a character that you would rather go for if you have the chance and not focus on, B tier. Next we have Jade, who is basically a support that is a ranger. She has a single target defense break that is pretty impactful. I'm hearing a lot of good things about her. I think if you have the right comp, she's definitely a very good character to include. I am actually going to put her A tier for now. Next we have Kate, and her kit is mostly focused on debuffing the enemy. One problem with her is that she scales from crit chance, and although her energy skill gives her a little bit of crit, it's only for 5 seconds, and other than that there aren't many other sources of crit. It's just gear, so that's a little bit of a problem. That said, she's still a 3-star, she's a ranger, and she's a chaos type, so if you're looking for that type of unit, I still think she's a decent option, B tier. Next is Latika, and she's basically the hardest scaling character in the game. The downside is that she requires some time to reach her full potential, and since most battles are decided in the first 10 to 15 seconds, you won't have the chance to snowball with her. That said, if you have a 5-star Latika, she's definitely a unit that you could build around. I'd put her in the A tier. Next we have Leon Lev. We haven't talked about warriors yet, so let's do that quick. Sadly, I think warriors are the worst class in the game. They have many problems, with them being exclusively melee and most warriors having single target focused kits. What ends up happening often is that they are fighting the enemy frontline and just die really quick. Another thing is that since they are melee, they often just run around the map trying to reach a target and basically do nothing for extended periods of time. Now, with all that said, I think Leon Lev is actually a pretty good character. We're gonna put her at the B tier. While she technically suffers all of the problems that warriors have, she has really strong self buffs, making her occasionally do some pretty decent damage. And when you upgrade her character gear, she gains a 5-second immunity to damage when she's about to die. So, worst case scenario, she's still gonna hold down the front line for a decent bit. We had a good warrior, now we're gonna look at the other side. Now, sadly, Lucinda isn't a good character in my opinion. She's a warrior focused on buffing other warriors, and since the whole class isn't very effective, that she just ends up doing pretty much nothing. Yet another warrior, Mika. You might look at her kit and see that she's supposed to do a lot of damage to tanks. But it's a similar story with her as with other warriors. She sadly just dies way too quick and does nothing. So another E tier. Next we have Minnie, who is honestly one of my favorite character designs in the game. She's very focused on single target damage, has some pretty decent self buffs, and she also has a teleport, which is pretty useful for an assassin, since she can drop enemy aggro with that. Now, that said, I think she suffers a little bit from being a 2-star. With her being solely focused on damage, the lower stats definitely hurt her. So I'm going to put her in D tier for now. Next we have a very interesting support. Miyamoto has a very unique gimmick that makes your ally stand still at the beginning of the battle. I've honestly yet to see that being used to some great advantage, and since I don't find her other supporting skills to be that powerful, I am going to put her at C tier for now. That said, she definitely feels like a character that could break the game at some point, but you know, time will tell. Next we have Moni. Now, she's honestly another character that her values in the passive, by how much she increases energy damage taken, are so high that I'm not sure if they are intended. Now, Moni herself deals pretty good AoE damage, but the energy damage increase, if you have another energy damage dealer, is so high that she's pretty much an S tier for me. Then we have Moon. She has really high single target damage. She scales really well with stats. She also has a teleport, which is always useful for an assassin. So overall, a really solid unit. B tier. Next we have Oven. She seems to be a little bit of a support and damage dealer hybrid. Now sadly, she doesn't seem to be able to stack her buffs and debuffs to an extent that would be really impactful. So for me, she's a D tier. Next we have Patch, who I would consider a pretty decent tank. She has some damage reduction when she has shields on her, and she also provides quite a bit of shields to her teammates. So overall, a pretty solid character, B tier. Now we have probably the best AoE damage dealer in the game, Peru. I don't think there's much to say about her other than I think she's one of the best characters in the game right now. The amounts of damage that she deals are just absolutely insane. Next we have the Seedream version of Peru, and fittingly enough, she's also insanely strong. She deals a lot of AoE damage, has a very strong self buff that makes her scale with critical damage very well. She even has some defensive tools, so she's definitely an S tier for me too. Then we have Quina. She doesn't have any built-in damage reduction, but with her being a 3-star and enjoying pretty high base stats, I am a little bit conflicted if she should go into B tier or A tier, but the fact that if you invest into her and she's a little bit ahead, she also has the potential to do really decent damage. I'm gonna put her into A tier for now. Next we have Sariel, and as expected, she suffers from all the problems that plague warriors. But she has a couple of things going for her. She has a stun, some pretty decent life absorb, making her hold the front line a little bit longer. And she's also a chaos type unit, so you might be looking for that type to activate a resonance. So that makes her a D tier for me. Next we have Scarlet, and not only is she a warrior, but also a 1-star. And with her lowered stats and her being pretty much solely focused on damage, she's one of the worst characters for me, E tier. The last warrior on our list is Tachibana. Now, she has fairly strong single target damage, and with her being a 3-star, I might actually consider her in some formations if you end up having a lot of copies of her. So C tier. Then we have Taco, and although she's a 1-star unit, I would say she still has some pretty decent damage. She deals a lot of AoE damage, and pretty much the only thing that is holding her back are the lowered stats. So C tier for me. Somewhat similar to Taco, Taraxa is another damage dealer that is held down mostly by her stats. She still does end up doing a little bit, and in the rare occasions that you desperately need Ranger synergy, you might find her somewhat useful. D tier. Now, probably one of the most broken characters in the game is Vitti. Her kit doesn't matter that much, other than her ultimate being really impactful. If you're resetting a lot of stages in the campaign trying to beat them, Vitti is a character that will eventually allow you to pass that stage given enough time. But even without resetting, her ultimate ends up being very impactful on the battlefield, so she's definitely an S tier for me. Next we have the Sea Dream version of Vitti. She's a decent tank, although she lacks damage mitigation. She has fairly good chances to apply attack speed reductions, and as with normal Vitti, she has chances to apply disorients, just on a lesser scale. I personally would put her a little bit lower than Quina and Doris, but that said, with her being a chaos type, I think she's still a very good and versatile tank, so B tier. Next we have X, and she's definitely a standout assassin to me. Not only does she do a lot of damage, including AoE, she also has really strong self buffs, making her scale with stats very well. And most importantly, she has reliable abilities to drop aggro from enemies, making her survive in the backline for a long time. She's definitely a character that you could build around. So for me, she's A tier. Now the last sleeper we have is Yuan. Now she might seem a little bit weak, but with her being able to regenerate health, she can help a little bit with off-tanking. She also increases energy damage taken, and her ultimate, which displaces enemies, really helps clamp them up for AoE damage, and often makes them switch targets, which can also come in handy. Now, there are situations where I would consider this unit, so for me personally, she's C tier. So there we go, those were all the units. I'm sure balance changes will come, my opinions will change, but this is more or less how I currently see the leapers in the game. Be sure to share your insight down in the comments, I'm very interested in other takes. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I hope you have a great day, and I see you next time. Bye!